This is the last video in my series on indicators of satanic ritual abuse. When we put together all these different indicators, and there should be several of them, it gives us an idea whether or not a person's problems are caused by satanic ritual abuse. I've talked about psychological, emotional, and spiritual indicators, and now I'm going to briefly list physical indicators of SRA, and then I'm going to put them all together in my last slide to explain how I bring them together to get a very clear picture of whether or not a person is satanically ritually abused. So here is my list of physical problems commonly found in people who have suffered this kind of abuse: migraine headaches, eating disorders, sexual dysfunctions, fibromyalgia, digestive tract problems, reflux, ulcers, colitis, blood chemistry imbalance, pain in joints of hips, heart problems, history of substance abuse, TMJ, hysterectomy, unexplained intermittent pain in stomach, lower back, vagina, or rectum, bowel problems often starting in childhood, unexplained scars or tattoos, liver or adrenal malfunctions, thyroid disorder, diagnosed epileptic, urinary tract infections, collapsed rectal wall, arthritis or lupus, hypertension, choking sensations, missing digits, unidentifiable bruises, cuts, scrapes, etc., and knee problems. Now I'm going to bring together different indicators of DID and SRA that I've taught in my other videos, and I'm going to put them together to show how when you get many of these related to one person, you can be pretty sure that person is satanically ritually abused. So here's a person, I think he had around 23 indications that he was SRA and DID. The first one was he had excessive fears. He died of a tooth abscess. I don't know if he was afraid to go to the doctor or if he didn't think he deserved good dental care, but for whatever reason, he died needlessly, a very, very senseless death. If he'd gone to the dentist, everything would have been fine. He was depressed. He had emotional issues. He was just a very emotional person. I believe that stemmed from unresolved issues from his past. He was very stubborn, and people who've been abused are often stubborn. They had to be in order to survive their abuse. He had memories of sexual abuse. None of it took place in the family, but it happened by a neighbor when he was 4 years old. The neighbor was abusing little boys. And I don't know how many times it happened to him, but ever after that, he had many encounters where people were trying to get at him in a sexual way that was not normal at all. He was bulimic. He would eat until he couldn't hold any more and go vomit it up and then come back and eat again. He might do that 2 or 3 times. He was self-destructive. One time we were at a dinner together where they were serving steak, and he spread butter all over his steak, and then he got mayonnaise and covered the steak with mayonnaise. It was as if he couldn't seem to get enough cholesterol into his system, so he just had to heap it on. His wife told me that sometimes he would take a Coca-Cola, a regular Coke, not a Diet Coke, and he would put sugar in it, and yet he was diabetic. So he was self-destructive. I think he probably had some issues of guilt that were unresolved. He was obsessed with food. He stored food everywhere. He would take bags of dried beans and rice and hide them down in the stuffed furniture in the living room. He would hide it anywhere. And I think he had real fears about food, and sometimes this happens if a child has been deprived of eating. He had multiple health problems. He had hepatitis many times. He had problems with his knees at a young age. He had arthritis, and he had self-induced diabetes. If he had not eaten the strange things he did and refused to take care of his health, he would not have had diabetes at all. He was repeatedly finding himself in evil surroundings. It seemed like without even trying, he would just be with people that were evil, or evil people would just come up to him and try to have a relationship with him. And this happens often to people who've been abused because they have demons that are trying to guide them unconsciously to be with evil people, or evil people, the demons and evil people pick up on this person's demons, knowing that this is an abused person, and they come around and try to have a relationship with him. He had indications of dissociation, such as sudden changes in mood and behavior. He spoke in half sentences. Now that one can happen if different parts come out at different times. He could be right in the middle of a sentence and switch to another part and never finish the sentence and go off on something totally different. He was childlike. Now this would be probably because he had children inside, child alters that would come out from time to time. He had unexplainable weird behavior. He just did very strange things. Anybody that was around very long would think that was weird. Also, he was forgetful. Now, people who dissociate can be forgetful because one part of them can start a project and switch into somebody else and completely forget what they were doing. He had several kinds of supernatural experiences that indicated an open veil, that the veils that separate us from the spirit world had been somewhat stripped away for him. And this is something that takes place in satanic rituals. For example, he had frequent demon visitations at night. Now, people who have not been involved in anything occult would not be aware of demons at night, even if they visited them, which would be highly unlikely. They visit them at night because they've been given permission to through the satanic rituals they've been involved in. So this is a very strong indicator of satanic ritual abuse. And he had the ability to know things supernaturally. And this is something that can come from the Lord, and it can also come from demon spirits. But here's an experience he had. When he was in junior high school, a magician came to the school to put on a magic show for the kids. And he pulled a card out of a deck of cards and held it up and said, "Does anybody know what this card is?" Well, he knew what the card was. Now that's not the Holy Spirit in operation. That's a demon telling him. And that's something that would happen because of occult activity. Also, he could get information out of people that no one else could. That would be like a power that he possessed. His wife told me one time they were at an office party, and a new person had come into the office, and nobody could find out anything about him. And so some of the women were talking about this, that nobody could find out anything about him. And my friend's wife said, "Oh, I'm going to send him over there to talk with this new man. He'll find out something." So he went over there and talked with him for a while, and sure enough, he came back with all kinds of information. Now that's a demonic power. But then there were things that happened in the church that people would assume was the activity of the Holy Spirit. And it is true that people who have been abused in this way can also hear from God. Sometimes they are hearing from the demons, and sometimes they can actually hear from God. So this was this experience when he was ministering in a church. He would have words of knowledge for people, and it could give them a prophetic word. Also, when people came up for prayer and he laid hands on them to pray, many of them fell down under the power. Sometimes that's called being slain in the Spirit. That happened a lot with him. And so whether or not that was of God or not, I would not want to pass judgment. But the fact is that the veil was somewhat open to him, and he had a lot of supernatural experiences, which is a very strong indicator of being involved in the occult. So with all the things I've mentioned here, I believe there were 23 of them, I was quite certain that he had suffered satanic ritual abuse and been involved in occult for most of his life.